Welcome into a special edition of Inside Carolina's podcast, YouTube channel, whatever you want to call it. That's Grace Nugent. I'm Tommy Ashley. This is sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Normally in this space, you guys would see head coach Scott Forbes with us. He's a little busy this week. Scott had media availability on Monday for the Chapel Hill Regional. They've got another open practice on Thursday. So if you're watching this Thursday, head out to Boshamer Stadium and try to catch the open practice. Forbes will meet with the media as well. So tonight you get Grace and Tommy. We're going to talk a little Chapel Hill Regional keys to victory for North Carolina. Grace, I'm going to let you get in straight out the top. I'm going to give you first pick, first key, however you want to take this. Carolina opens with Long Island on Friday night, LSU on the other side with Wofford. What's the first key?
First key, I think, in any baseball game, it's got to be the pitching. Starting pitching. That's really what UNC needs. They need length from their starters. Depending on whoever they start, Forbes has a predicament, a puzzle, if you will, on who to start when. They're playing the 4 seed first on Friday, Long Island, with maybe not the best arms of the entire regional, and then we'll either play Wofford or LSU the next day. And both LSU has a good 1-2 punch, and Wofford has a very talented bona fide ace who will be taking them out against LSU. But Forbes is going to have to decide, is he keeping with the DeCaro, Sprague, Hauk, or is he going to mix it up?
I guess we'll find out. Here's my take, and this is going to be something a little different from certainly the message board people and the people that pay attention to this. Is I don't think you mess with what's worked during the season, and I don't know if you agree or not. And I'd love to hear your take. Jason DeCaro has been the lead for the weekend all year, at least when Boaz went out, and he's done well in that position. And the fact of the matter is, if you take a team lightly in a regional, and Forbes referenced this about Davidson beating them several years ago. If you look past that first team, then you end up in the loser's bracket straight out the gate. And the thing about regional play is you can't, whether you lose the first game or the second game, it doesn't matter. It still causes you to play those extra games. So Carolina needs to play to win game one and game two, whoever their opponent is on Saturday. That's why I think you start Jason DeCaro on Friday night and roll with it. And then you let Shea Sprague take on either Wofford or LSU. He's the vet. He's the guy with the experience. He hadn't had a ton, or if any, tournament experience, but he's certainly pitched in a bunch of ball games, and he certainly can handle the pressure. That's my take on the pitching rotation. I know it's a big deal on the message boards. What do you think about it?
I think that Jason has done a really good job of setting the tone every weekend, and giving him and Shea 2 days extra rest might actually hurt more than it would help. I think that if they enter a loser's bracket, that is worst case scenario. I don't think they have the arms to get through a loser's bracket and maybe come out on top, especially if that might mean playing LSU 2 or 3 times. So I think just Forbes has a big thing to juggle. I think if I was him, the person that I might think about moving to Friday is Aiden, because he has pitched the least amount of starting innings, so you might be able to save him a little bit so he could pitch again after Shea and Jason if they need another game. But I do agree with you that this has worked. And Shea is a very capable pitcher for whoever he's taking on, LSU or Wofford. They've only lost 2 games when he started, and that was the ACC tournament weight game and then one of the state games. And he's a very talented pitcher. He's an older pitcher. My one fear is that with him, especially if you're going up against a team like LSU, Wofford has some good bats too. But if you're going up against a team like LSU and you give up 1 or 2 of those long balls, it might be hard to recover, especially depending on LSU has Gage Jump, who could, his opponent batting average is 167. So if you confidently believe your team can hit your way out of anything, which UNC has proved they can, then I think you stick with what you got. But that would be my one fear with Shea. He has his fastball and his changeup, which he tunnels off each other really well, which is more of his feel pitch, and he can command and hit those spots. But his fly ball and home run numbers, that's the only thing that would give me a little bit of worry, especially when you have a guy like Tommy Tanks who can come in and who can hit. So it's up to Forbes to decide what he wants to do. And he has that experience. He is a pitching coach.
Yeah, I mean, they've got an opportunity. You look at, and again, we're jumping ahead a little bit. You look at Tommy White, he's got 24 home runs. Jared Jones has 26, and then Travinsky has 15. And then that's it in double figures for LSU. I just think, um, do they trust Aiden Houck to go out there in the first round of a regional? You're 32-2 at home. That is pressure, added pressure. Of course, I think in reality, Carolina got not a break, but a pressure break when they put LSU in that region, because everybody starts saying, well, LSU is going to come out of this region. Nobody's talking about North Carolina. I think that helps Scott Forbes' team. I think Forbes can use that as a chip. But I just think you need to stick with what's worked. And he's talked a lot all year about keeping guys on schedule. And he did it in the ACC tournament, and now we're here in the same spot. I'd be surprised if he switched it up. Either way, to your point earlier, they've got to get some length out of the starting pitching. Regional games, regionals are weird because, like, you either play 3 games or you play 5 if you're going to advance, and that's huge. And that's why winning those first 2 games are important, because if you win the first 2, then you've got 1 left or 2 left, possibly 2 left. But if you lose the first one or lose the second one, then you're coming out of the loser's bracket the same way. It'll be an interesting dynamic. That is a huge deal going forward. Pitching is always important. North Carolina has seen what elite pitching can do against them, but LSU's also seen a ton of different type pitching, and Long Island is no pushover, and you don't want to get caught. And I just don't see a situation where Forbes allows that to be a catching point, but we'll see.
Yeah, you definitely need the starters to get length. And say you throw Jason on Friday, hoping he'll get into that 6th, 7th inning. That means that hopefully you can save those pen arms so that if you do have to do a staff day or Shea struggles or Aiden struggles, you'll have arrested Maddie and Dalton and Poston and Peterson, all of those guys who are that 3 to 4 headed monster in what I think is the best bullpen in this region. They just need to make sure they're rested and then they can go in and deliver, especially if you need to use them as a staff day.
Yeah, and you don't want to run a bunch of guys out on Friday or Saturday and then have to play Sunday possibly twice and Monday possibly. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's always a thing. The bottom line is, to your point, get some length from whoever starts and save bullpen arms, and then you can use a guy like Ben Peterson. I talked to LSU radio earlier today, and I told them a guy they might hear is Ben Peterson. Might be an important guy in this region for North Carolina. We'll see how it shakes out. Key number 2. Well, first, we're talking with Grace Nugent, and I'm Tommy Ashley. This is Carolina's Keys on Chapel Hill Regional, of course, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Grace, key number 2 for this North Carolina team to advance to a super regional next weekend.
Situational hitting. Just saw how that did not go in the Tar Heels' favor when they lost to the Demon Deacons in 12 innings in the final game of ACC pool play. It was not a pretty situational sack. Couldn't get a sack fly. Couldn't get a bunt down. That is something that a ball club this experienced, especially this lineup, needs to be able to do going down the stretch. You got to hit with runners in scoring position. You have guys that get on base. We'll talk more about the top 4 in that lineup coming up. But Vance, D'Onofrio, you get either of those guys on base, you need to find a way to get them in because they will steal, they will run. And I think the biggest thing, I think every single time that UNC has played Wake is a really good kind of metric to look at. Their series where they swept Wake really showed just how good they can be. They hit with runners in scoring position. They hit for power. Colby Wilkerson hit a home run. They hit off 98-mile. Casey Cook hit 2 homers off 98-mile-per-hour fastballs from Chase Burns. Like, it just shows how powerful this lineup can be. They hit singles. They hit doubles. And when you go up against pitching and able to close out a series, and then in that last game they played against Wake in the ACC tournament, it really showed how they can hang in there, which is something that they've struggled with during one-run games. But it also kind of was a reminder of the things that they need to work on, their Achilles heel, if you will say. If your starter only holds Wake, a very powerful Wake lineup who's finally getting into themselves. I mean, if you looked at the ESPN broadcast before the game started, it was all like Seaver King, Nick Kurtz, these guys are going to get drafted in the first round. Well, they played really well, and UNC was still able to, the starting pitching, Shea was still able to hold him pretty well. So it's all about if this is a high, I think the calling card for this team is just how good they are offensively. So many guys in double digits for homers. You have D'Onofrio and Honeycutt who, I mean, steal more bases than your average elite ball club. You have Honeycutt's stellar, all the defense up the middle. But if their calling card is hitting and offense, they need to actually be able to do that. And especially in those situations where it's do or die. And with the ACC tournament, they can play again. But if they lose in some of these games, there is no next game to redeem themselves.
Yeah, it sort of ramps up the pressure here. And I think if my memory serves, there was a streak there during the season. They were 1 for 19 with runners in scoring position or something crazy. To your point, when they're clicking, they score a ton of runs. But the problem is when they start getting in those lulls where they miss opportunities. And the Wake game in the tournament was frankly a great example of what happens when you miss clear opportunities. Somebody get a hit. Somebody put the ball in play. And that's another one of my keys. And I guess I'll piggyback on that is put the ball in play, whether it's a bunt or whether it's a sac fly. And Carolina struggled with that at times in games that they've lost. Now, it's difficult to talk about how much they've struggled when their record is what they are. They're ACC regular season champions. They're a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. I mean, they've done great things. But to your point and to this discussion, they've gotten in trouble when they don't put the ball in play, when they've had opportunities to score some runs with guys in scoring position. And you have to do that in the regional. You have to do it whether you're playing Long Island, whether you're playing Wofford, and you dang better do it when you're playing LSU because you leave opportunities on the table, then you're left with what ifs later. And I think that is the thing that North Carolina's got to get done. Let's talk about the bunt issue a little bit. People on the message boards, especially at Inside Carolina, and shout out to the people that get involved. It's crazy to me how baseball is not much talked about. But then when it really heats up, a lot of people come out. And one of those things is people say, why can a college player not get a bunt down? To Forbes' point the other day, well, I mean, it's a lot harder than you think. But as our discussion here, you got to get that ball in play. You've got to get a bunt down. You've got to move a runner over. That's what makes teams champions versus what makes teams regular season champions. And I think that'll be key. I like the situational hitting aspect of it. It's not necessarily getting a hit. It's sacrificing somebody over or hitting a ball to the outfield and getting a person in to win, to score a run late. It'll be key, and it'll come up 100%. Scott Forbes always talks about karma. One thing about baseball is it exposes your flaws every day. And sometimes it costs the game, and sometimes it doesn't show up in the box score, but your flaws are out there. I think for this Carolina team, that is a bugaboo that they've had all year at times. We'll see if it changes. I'm going to throw out one for you, and then I'm going to let you sort of tell me why this is good or bad, or this is a key or not. Play clean baseball in the field. This team was fantastic after that Wake series. But in that Wake series, there were times, and Colby Wilkerson's been a fantastic fielder for a long time. There were times it looked like he had not played the game before with the mistakes that they were making. And those type things can kill you in the postseason. That's one of my big keys. Not necessarily error-free. That's a lot to ask, especially in college baseball, given the pressure that's coming with the tournament. But play clean in the field and then let Vance Honeycutt, D'Onofrio, and Casey Cook clean up all the mess in the outfield. I think that's a very important spot for Carolina.
I completely agree with that. They need to play cleanly and not give any free passes defensively. And you have the best statistically, you have the best center fielder, you have the best outfielder in the country. Vance leads in defensive runs saved. The only I think 3 guys ahead of him are a catcher and a shortstop, which makes sense with all the outfield chances. And the percentage of fly balls that are hit to him that would normally be hits that he gets that are outs is just absurd. And the
Mm-hmm.
outfield is, I mean, arguably one of the best outfields in the nation. There's maybe only one other that I can think of off the top of my head, and that's A&M. And they're just a powerhouse. But UNC, they're so talented defensively in that outfield, and it just comes down to all that defense up the middle. You need Alex Madera has been, I think, one of the unsung heroes of this team defensively. Yes, in that weight game, both he and Colby Wilkerson made errors in the 9th inning, but his ability to turn a double play, to grab a line drive, to get a hard ground ball, I think has done really well. And it might not always show up on the stat sheet. It might not be he has the most wins above replacement, but his ability to turn that double play and really connect with Colby is they're going to need it, and it's going to need to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And Gavin too, I mean, he was kind of thrust into the hot corner and they've had some trouble there, and he's really kind of coming into his own, but he's also going to have to play some really clean baseball, because if a ball gets away from him, if a ball gets away from Parks, that's just going to spell trouble. And they don't need to give whatever team they're playing, they should not be giving any free passes in that area. And kind of piggybacking off that, obviously not the same, but pitching wise, free passes as well.
Mm-hmm.
They need to make sure if you walk a guy, I know it's going to happen. It's baseball. You're going to walk some guys, but you just have to be you got to be pinpoint on and trust your defense that they're going to get those ground balls and stuff like that, because especially if you're playing Wofford steals, they're second in the nation in stolen bases. If you get a guy, they have a guy who I think it's 42 stolen bases. Crazy. Vance is not. He's half that. And
Mm-hmm.
they will run all over the base paths. So if you get a guy on, that's a double or a triple right there. He's on second or third. And LSU is also a very, very good team that they can hit and get someone in. So I think both pitching and defensively, you just need to play your cleanest baseball.
Yeah, and one thing, and you hit on them, Carolina has, I think one thing this team has lacked all year, and this is not a detriment to the guys that have played the position, I think they've lacked a dynamic third baseman. I mean, we've watched enough baseball this year to see the difference that a dynamic, and I'm talking about stop balls from getting in the corner, make diving stops there, making the plays. Gavin Gallagher's gotten a lot better, and Jackson Vandenbrake has played some solid baseball there. But whoever's there, and we assume it'll be Gallagher for the most part. But even if it is Vandy, make plays there and make the plays, make the plays that you don't expect them to make. You need a few of those. And then Harbor at first. Harbor's gotten better as well, but he needs to make those plays. But I think probably the biggest part of this key for me that you mentioned is, and I'll add it to one of mine, is finish defensive innings. 2 outs, don't walk the guy. We talk about it ad nauseum. It is a thing in baseball from when the kids first start pitching into the major leagues. Is when you get 2 outs, stay focused. That's one thing that maybe DeCaro, maybe Sprague to a certain extent, maybe Houck to a certain extent. You cannot give up those free passes, because basically these teams at this point in the season can turn them into extra runs. And if what people expect to happen on Friday happens and Carolina plays LSU, not only does it give people an opportunity to have an at bat, it turns the lineup over faster. And so if you're walking an 8-9 hitter, then that means those top 3 guys are getting up again. It's the same on Carolina, for Carolina on the other side of it. But for Carolina pitchers, is don't walk a guy. You know, if they hit and they get on base, they do. But you cannot give those free passes. You can't make errors in the field. It's winning baseball time for North Carolina, and those are key things that can keep you from accomplishing your goals. And they're really simple. It is just make the play, make the routine play, make an occasional splash play, and then throw strikes. It's key for baseball. Let me talk about our sponsors right fast. We're 20 minutes in. That's Grace Nugent. I'm Tommy Ashley. It's Carolina Keys to a Chapel Hill Regional. Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of this show, sponsors of Tar Pit and UNC Basketball Premium Message Board, folks. So if you want to get in on the action, get your 10%, join the Inside Carolina Premium, and then get that 10% off at Johnny T-Shirt. And congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Submit the form, get your free assessment for your small to mid-sized business. This is a locally owned business. Those guys work their way up into a national brand, but Congruity started locally, and they can start your small business as well. National guys will pay the bills on the audio version. We'll be right back. All right. Another key. I'm going to give you one of mine, and then I'm going to let you have it. Start fast. I was looking at LSU stats, and it's probably similar for everybody in the country. LSU scores first, they're pretty dominant. They give up runs first, they're regular. And it's the same for every team in the country. Carolina has shown the ability to battle back. They showed it against Wake Forest. Vance Honeycutt can struggle at the plate and then come up with big hits. But Carolina needs to get out of the gate early, like they did. If they can do like they did in the ACC tournament when they hit 4 first inning home runs, makes the game a whole lot easier. What do you think about starting fast, Grace?
I was going to say the ACC tournament, the 4-homer inning. I think, and they showed this well at Duke, that they were down a few times and they were able to kind of battle back. I think that they need to start fast. They need to start off on the right foot. And they also need to keep it going. They don't need to take their foot off the gas. I think that's sometimes their problem is they'll start fast and then, how do you rival 4 homers in 1 inning? And then they kind of plateau. So I think not only do they need to start fast, but they need to keep going. And you talked about the top of LSU's lineup earlier, and this whole Tar Heel lineup has showed that they have power, they have speed, they're able to make plays, but it's especially that top 4 who, just like Jason DeCaro on Fridays, is going to set the tone. Well, that top 4 is going to set the tone to start the Long Island game. And you need Vance, Casey, Harbor, D'Onofrio to be the players that to live up basically to their full potential. You need Vance Honeycutt to be the Vance Honeycutt, the one everyone is talking about. The 2022 postseason Vance Honeycutt would be awesome if he decides to come out and make a reappearance. But you need those guys, especially your guys like Vance and D'Onofrio, who are just wreak havoc on those base paths. You get one of those guys on, you have a better chance to start fast because Harbor and Casey can hit people in. So I think that it's really going to come down to starting fast and making sure those kind of like big dogs in your lineup can perform. And that's not to minimize the rest of that lineup. I think Colby Wilkerson is having a career year. Luke Stevenson can absolutely mash. So can Osuna. And Gavin has put together some really quality at-bats. He's got some at-bats that are 7 to 10 pitches where he really works the pitcher, which helps everyone on that team. Madera has speed. I think he kind of functions as a good almost second leadoff style hitter. But it all starts at the top. It starts at the top of the game, and it starts at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, it feels like, whether and getting a hit necessarily isn't the biggest thing. It's like we've seen some games where the top 3 will go down. Casey Cook's really good about battling. Even if he strikes out, it's still a quality at bat because he made the guy throw quality pitches and all. But don't go down early. Don't strike out straight out the gate. But I think that for Carolina to have success this weekend, and it's all weekend from Friday through Sunday and Monday if necessary, is you're right. The top 4 need to lead this team. The bottom half could do it. We've seen the bottom half carry the top half before, but I think for Carolina to really excel, those guys need to start fast and stay in the game. To your point, you hit 4 home runs in the first inning. Let's not go dormant for the next 6 and sort of let the other team off the hook. But it'd be interesting to see how they come out. The final key for me, and then we'll get to some viewer questions, and then I'll let you go in. But playing at home, I mean, 32-2 at home. I don't care who you play. I don't care what level of baseball you're playing. I don't care anything about that. 32-2 at home is ridiculous, and Carolina gets the opportunity to bring that confidence into this. So my last key is play with confidence, play free. You're at home, you're in front of your crowd. Do what you know you can do, and don't let the moment be too big because it is at home and they're your lights and all. And I think Carolina can have some success.
I agree. I think it sounds cliche, but play your brand of baseball.
Yep.
Forbes and every single guy we've talked to the whole time, they're like, it's process oriented. It's process oriented. Well, this is part of the process. Play your game of baseball. Don't let the future national champions, one of the hottest teams in baseball right now, all of that jazz, the SEC, take away from what they can do, especially what they can do at home. And that home field advantage is so important, not just because this is their park, they know how to play there, but also because they're sleeping in their own beds and
Mm-hmm.
they're not taking a bus to the game. They get to drive. It's just all those little things too. They need to be confident, and they need to, like Hubert Davis says, block out the noise, because there's going to be a lot. There's going to be 600 LSU fans there. It's going to be a little bit of pandemonium, and they need to make sure that they can lock in and stay with their approach, stay with their process, and play their brand of baseball. If they let their heads get too big or they get involved too much in what people are saying, I think that's really going to be their downfall. And they have the talent. I think they have the talent to 100% win this regional. They have to execute and they have to do it. And I think if Coach Forbes was here, he would say we're going to stick with the process, and that's exactly what they have to do.
It's going to be an interesting take. Those are our 5 keys. What we did on the message boards, and everybody watching this is certainly big on the baseball message boards, is Grace posted earlier today, send us your questions. So I'm going to look at that now, and I'm going to ask the questions. First of all, how is Remington? I will tell you, folks, that I was there on Monday at the viewing party, and Remington was living the life, going around, meeting all the fans, taking pictures. Just a great part of that program. Don't underestimate the power of a dog, and
I
Remington was showing it. And you didn't get to see him again.
I still haven't met Remington, and it makes me so sad.
He
I
is awesome. He is awesome, and I told the story about my dog on one of our other shows. I'm not a big dog person now, but he certainly makes you smile, and to see people interact with him and to see that, but also see how the players interact with him, and Terry Joe and all that is pretty awesome. So it's funny that the first question I choose is a dog question, but it's kind of where we're at. Let's see. How did the fan event go? Hills Edge asked. That's part of it. It was a viewing party for the regional Hate You Missed It Grace, but I don't know if it was season ticket holders or everybody. They had food. Forbes stood on top of one of the dugouts and talked to the folks there. The players were interacting with the fans, and then everybody watched the bracket on the big screen or on the scoreboard. And I thought it was interesting when the audible noises that people would make with certain matchups popped up on the screen, and then when LSU popped up on Carolinas, it was a big I can't say it on air moment, but it was that moment
I
when that happened.
I did that from my couch in Texas. I was watching it with my best friend who goes to Texas, so she'll be in College Station this weekend covering the A&M regional there, and she watched me like dramatically fall on my couch when they announced the Chapel Hill region. I was like,
It
I did
is
not get that right at all.
it is it's an interesting choice. And when I talked to the LSU guys, I said, you got to beat the man if you want to be the man. So you might as well do it. And it is interesting how all the and I know why they did it, but all the SEC schools did not catch any SEC's team in their regions because they don't want to have that mix there. So every ACC school had an SEC school as a 2 seed. Carolina just happened to draw probably the hottest one in the bunch. That wasn't the thing. But anyway, any of those questions you want to tackle, or you want to just tell these folks all the research that you did for this show? One thing, folks, let me tell you about Grace, and y'all have read it in her article. She prepares. And if you know me well enough, you know I wing it a lot. Grace, look at that board thread and let us know if you've got any questions you want to talk about, or just what more knowledge you want to share here before we get out of here.
Well, I saw some of the questions earlier. Thank you, everyone, for responding. Was a little bit nervous no one was going to say anything, but I'm glad we've gotten some good responses. Someone asked about some of the best pitchers that are coming in, and so there are 3 that I've singled out. Zach Cowan for Wofford, who will be facing LSU, I believe. D1 just named him their pitcher of the week. He's 9-2. He has 118 Ks in 104 innings pitched. That man's arm must be so tired. But he had a fantastic week last week. He only allowed 5 runs, 2 walks, and then struck out 13 in the 2 games that Wofford had in their conference tournament. But the 2 other big names, the biggest one is going to be Gage Jump, who is the LSU, I guess you could say their ace. They have a 1-2 punch in him, and then Luke Holman. And he, both Gage and Luke are just really, really talented. Holman has a 1.67 opponent batting average, and the 2 of them make a really good. I was reading some articles earlier about just the level of pitching that's coming into Chapel Hill, and that LSU probably has the best rotation, but UNC has the best bullpen, and they have a really good 1-2 punch in Jump and Holman, and they just lost one of their best bullpen arms. Little will not be there, but those 2 guys, whoever UNC gets, that's going to be, I think it's going to be Holman. That will be an interesting matchup. Tar Heels have shown that they can do it against quality pitching. Savage, Burns, Hartle, Massey. So that'll be interesting to see. But there's going to be some good pitching to watch. And I'm excited for that. But the other question that I think was my favorite question that I saw that required me to do some research, and everyone can disagree with me on what I'm about to say, but someone asked for comparisons for the 3 teams in the regional to teams that UNC has already played. So I have 3 in my argument for each one. Feel free to disagree with me later. But Long Island was the hardest one for me to find, partially because I don't know a lot about their conference. The only team in their conference that UNC has played is Wagner, which was the opening series. And I kind of went through their RPI, and I'm putting them in the middle. If you combine Elon and Wagner into a team, I'm going to say it's that. In RPI, they're between the 2. I think they're 146. So I'm going to say they're a little bit better than Wagner, but they're a little bit worse than Elon. I don't have as much
You're giving people hope, right? You're giving people hope on Friday, or hope, or a strong overconfidence level, maybe.
I'm just trying to give you numbers. Now, this is my favorite thing about baseball, in that the worst team can beat the best team. I think it is something that is, I mean, obviously that can happen in basketball, that can happen in football, but in baseball, it just happens so much more. I have seen so many teams that I love lose to, I watched Texas lose to Rio Grande Valley this year at home in Austin. That's terrible. That should not happen. But that's the magic of baseball. The Goliaths can be slayed by the Davids. So, like they say in Ted Lasso, it's the hope that kills you. It's good to have hope, but also just don't be too overconfident. That's my LIU pick. I would say for Wofford, the closest one that I could find is Campbell. They both have a really aggressive offense on the base paths. It's going to be, if Wofford and UNC play, it'll be very interesting to see the Luke Stevenson bazooka arm versus Marshall Toll, who ranks 2nd nationally in steals. He has 42. He also has 10 triples. That's a lot of triples. D'Onofrio, I think Anthony D'Onofrio either leads or is tied for the lead in the ACC in triples, and he has 6. And this kid has 10. So that, and they have, I think, the second most stolen bases in the nation, maybe the first most in the entire tournament. So that'll be a really fun matchup to look at. Campbell plays a similar type of offense. They're both mid majors that have some really good weapons. They have their ace too, who will probably go up against LSU. So LSU cannot overlook that. And they also power the plate. They have 6 hitters hitting over 327 or better. And Campbell had the same thing. Campbell also had Barry Bonds' nephew, which I love to point out to people. He did hit a home run when the Tar Heels played Campbell the second time. So that would be my comparison there, and that is not a team to overlook either. UNC's had been in some close games with the Fighting Camels, so neither of these teams are ones to overlook, and definitely, obviously, the Tar Heels are not going to overlook LSU. I've debated with some people on whether LSU is Wake or Duke in my closest comparison. I'm going with Wake. I think that Wake might, on paper, be the better team, but LSU's hot. I watched them in the 9th inning almost take the SEC championship away from Tennessee. They are now the Wall in Hoover, Alabama might have had something to do with that, but they are a very, very talented baseball team, not just on name recognition alone. They both struggled early in their respective conferences. The Wake came out not well in the ACC, and neither did LSU in SEC play. But they're both very well-rounded teams. They're very dangerous. They're starting to look like their old selves as well. Wake was preseason number 1. LSU was preseason number 5. They have a lot of expectations that I don't think they're living up to. And so they're going to try to want to do that. Jump and Holman, I think, would be the closest comparison to Chase Burns and Josh Hartle. Obviously, Jump is not Josh Hartle or not Chase Burns, but he's still a very, very good arm. According to D1, he can be among some of the first college arms chosen, post Burns and Higgins-Smith, obviously. And then I think my other closest comparison would be Nick Kurtz and Tommy Tanks.
That's fair.
ESPN showed a graphic before the game, the ACC tournament game, where instead of Kurtz, it said Hurts. I think that was an accident, but he did 100% make UNC hurt. And I think that Tommy White, he has the exact same ability to do that. His strikeout percentage is also really low. It's like 12%. In comparison, the best power hitter on the Tar Heels, Vance, his is like 26. So that'll be really, really interesting. They're both round 1 caliber players. They're going to be picked in the first round of this upcoming draft. And they really have the ability to, with one swing of the bat, change the ball game. And Tommy Tanks is coming back to North Carolina. So it'll be a very, very interesting regional overall.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time in Chapel Hill. Of course, it kicks off Friday at noon with LSU and Wofford. To Grace's point, Wofford with their ace versus the LSU bats. I don't think you can overlook that game, and certainly North Carolina cannot overlook Long Island. You don't want to go from regional favorite to loser's bracket, and Carolina will have their business to take care of there. And then the potential matchups on Saturday are all over the place. But if Carolina does in fact play LSU, I asked the LSU people when I talked to them on the radio, and I may have mentioned this already, I said, how many LSU fans are traveling? They said, how many tickets did Carolina give them? And I told them what I thought. And he said, double that. And they might not all be in the stadium. They'll just be outside partying. So to Scott Forbes' point the other day, the RVs from LSU start rolling in. The party gets live in Chapel Hill. The regional should be off the hook. Grace will be covering it with the Inside Carolina team. Adam Smith, Evan Rogers, Grace in the press box, Jim Hawkins taking photos. Matt Clements will be there on Monday. If there's a chance we'll get there, I'll be in the stands somewhere, deferring to the experts to do the covering. So shout out to all of them doing the hard work. I deferred. I think this deferred is good. Or is it delegating? I don't know.
I was going to say,
interesting question.
You're deferring, and then you might be yelling in the stands.
I'll be watching very peacefully. So if you see us out there, shout us out.
Okay.
It'll be a fun time for sure. Carolina puts on a good show. One thing about it is to think about LSU, their home stadium seats what? 10? 10,000.
Alex Bach.
Boshamer filled to the gills, maybe 5. We'll see what happens on Saturday. It's going to be awesome. Either way you shake it out, college baseball is in the NCAA tournament. Grace, appreciate you taking the time. Get on back to North Carolina so you can get to work in Boshamer on Friday.